totally fine. So we can pretty much skip step 1. So that brings us to step 2. What is always going to be step 2? Good, RL. Move K to the other side. Now, which of these numbers is my K value?
-20.
-20, yeah. Remember, K is always the number that's outside of the parentheses. So remember, this is your H, this is your K, and the 5 is the A value. So we're moving the K value to the other side. So I'm going to add 20 to both sides. Let me make this nice and organized. Okay. So when I move 20 to the other side, 0 plus 20, I'm going to get 20. And then I just bring everything else down. So 5 times x minus 2 squared. All right. What is step 3? Oh.
Formation of their body or their hands crossed. It remains standing firm. Thank you, may be seated. Today's schedule is on period 1 to 5 seconds. FSA testing. Students, it is imperative that you check your email date. You'll be notified of your testing date and time for the FSA writing test via email. If you do not know how to access your email, please seek out from one of your teachers. Students, please take the time, teachers, please take the time to show students how to access. Thank you.
Estudiantes, muy importante es su correo electrónico diario. A través de su correo electrónico serán notificados de su fecha y tiempo de examen. Si no saben cómo acceder a su correo electrónico, por favor busquen ayuda de sus maestros. Maestros, por favor, tomen el tiempo de enseñar a los estudiantes cómo entrar a su correo. Uniform policy. It is mandatory for all students to be in uniform. Wear khaki pants with the appropriate grade level photos. Grade 6 white polos, grade 7 blue polos, grade 8 red polos. Student IDs are also required. Please remember to have them visible around your neck. Hoodies and hats are not a part of the uniform. The uniform policy will be enforced. Obligatoire élevé en Guinée. Partir de l'enseignement pour apprendre en kaki. Partir de l'enseignement pour apprendre en droit. Partir de l'enseignement pour apprendre en kaki. As élèves d'étudiants patinés, depuis son jegué à Dieu discipline. Tous les attaques de la police. Police uniforme colateral. Es mandatorio que todos los estudiantes usen uniforme. Pantalones azules o casi con el borde dorado por el siguiente. Sexto grado por el blanco, séptimo grado por el azul y octavo grado por el rojo. Los IDs de estudiantes también son parte de su uniforme. Por favor, recuerden tener lo visible alrededor de sus pies. CDC guidelines. Students, faculty, and staff. Please remember that it is mandatory for everyone to wear a mask at all times. Your mask should cover your nose, mouth, and chin. Again, please remember to wear a mask at all times. Estudiantes de facultad, por favor recuerden que es mandatorio que todos usen máscara al todo tiempo. Su máscara deberá cubrir su nariz, boca y barbilla. Por favor recuerden usar su máscara al todo tiempo. That is all for today's morning announcement. Have a Jaguar day.
All right, thank you for that. All right, so anyone have any questions on the announcements we heard? I'm just answering someone in the chat right now about what time to be picked up after your tests. So if you are an MSO student and you're going to be in school for your FSA, your test is going to be about 2 hours, including the break. So you can tell whoever's picking you up to pick you up about 2 hours later. So if your test is around 11 or 11:30, tell them, okay, pick me up around 1 or 1:30. So that's to answer that question. Any other questions? Do you bring book bags? Nope, you don't have to bring a single thing, just yourself. They'll give you pencils, they'll give you paper, they'll give you everything you need. Bring yourself, and then if you have, make sure you wear a uniform if you have it, or at least, you know, the right color, so that way they know that you're a student there. And for physical students, bring what you usually bring. So Guillermo, you already go into school every day. You can just treat it like a normal day. Just bring what you usually bring. I'm mostly talking to the MSO students. So if you're MSO specifically, just bring yourself. If you're already in school normally, do what you normally do. Cool. Anything else? Red, white, or blue. Yeah. And I think, but it's specific for grade level. So can someone remind me? I think 7th grade is blue and 8th grade red. Cool. We're taking the test on the computer. Do we need to take our own laptops? Nope. You will be going to a computer lab and you're going to take the test on a desktop computer. Cool. And then let me see, are there anything else? Oh, yes. So those of you who are testing, a lot of you guys have it this week or next week. Either way, you are going to miss my class because the test is either at 9 or at 11. Either way, you miss my class. So that's fine. That's totally fine. I know the date that you won't be here. I'm not going to mark you absent. I'm aware that you're going to be testing. So don't worry if you miss my class. I'm going to find a way to make sure that nobody misses information. So I'll always make sure that whatever you missed, you'll learn. Cool. Any other questions? Oh, if your test is at 11:30, then you should be able to still make it to class. Yeah, so that's good. Is there homework due Friday? Yes. Okay, all right. Last chance, any quick questions on the FSA? All right, cool. So let's continue here. So we did step 1, we did step 2. What is step 3? You can remind me. Good, we divide. Divide by the A value. Well, in this case, which one's my A value? 5. Good. So I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides, which is going to help me to cancel out my 5. So I'll be left with x minus 2 squared. 20 divided by 5, I get 4. Step number 4. We're almost there. What happens here? Yes, good, Guillermo. We're going to take the square root. Of both sides. So what that means is I'm going to take the square root. Now, why am I doing that? What cancels out when you take the square root?
The exponent.
The exponent, exactly. Because right now, let me move this up a little bit. Right now, think about it. We're trying to solve for x. We're trying to get x by itself. But x is inside of these parentheses, so we can't just, grab x and take it out of there. You have to take away the exponent. So we take the square root in order to cancel out the exponent. So I'm taking the square root over here and the square root over there. So what happens is the square root is the opposite of my exponent. So this cancels out. All right, and then finally, in step 5, what happens? Because what is the square root of 4?
2.
2, and what else? -2, exactly. So we use the positive and negative root to solve. So what that means is, okay, when you take the square root of 4, you get +2 and you also get -2. So I'm going to basically split this up into two possibilities. I get 2 equals x minus 2, and I get negative 2 equals x minus 2. So again, positive, the square root of 4, you get positive 2 and you get negative 2. And now we can finally solve this equation because we don't have any more parentheses, we don't have any more exponents. All we need to do is we're going to add 2 on both sides. So over here, I get x equals, what's negative 2 plus 2?
0.
And then over here, 2 plus 2, I get 4.
Why are we adding 2 again?
Because we're solving for x. And since I have x minus 2, right, we need to do the opposite. So we're going to add that 2 and bring it over to the other side. So these 5 steps, they're always going to be the same. Sometimes you can skip a step. Sometimes they start, you can skip step 1 because they already did it. Sometimes you can even skip. Sometimes you can even skip step 2. So you really have to look at every problem and then decide what you're going to do. What's going on?
Thank you.
Who's moving? The people who are testing? Yeah, okay, but that's nobody here today, right? I think it's mostly 6th graders today. Okay, all right. So any questions on this problem? We're gonna do a few more and then we're gonna do some more, slightly more challenging ones. But at this point, do I have any questions? Oops. All right, so like I said, these steps are always the same. So make sure that you have them written down. If you didn't write them down yet, I'm going to copy them onto the next slide so they're not going anywhere. So let's do the next problem. So again, we're going to follow the same steps. We just have different numbers this time. And this time I do have to do step 1 because they didn't do it for us. So we're going to set the function equal to 0. So all that means is you're going to take whatever is over here. Right now it's a y. Sometimes it's going to be f of x. Sometimes it's going to be g of x. Whatever it is, you're just going to set it equal to 0. You're going to replace it with a 0. And then we go through each step. So first thing, I'm going to move k to the other side. So what should I be doing in order to move my k value?
Adding 5.
Adding 5. All right, so 0 plus 5, I get 5 equals 5 times x minus 1 squared. All right, step 3, divide by the a value. Which one's my a?
5.
The 5, the one in the front. So I'm just going to divide by 5. What's 5 divided by 5?
1.
1, yeah. So 1 equals x minus 1 squared. Let me keep myself organized. Okay. Now I'm taking the square root of both sides. Which is going to help me to eliminate the exponent. Well, okay, what's the square root of 1? Good. It's 1. If you're ever not sure how to do square roots, just remember that the square root of something is the number that when you multiply it times itself gives you that answer. So the square root of 1, which number times itself equals 1? 1 times 1 equals 1. And what's the other value? Negative 1, exactly. So I get positive 1 equals x minus 1, and negative 1 equals x minus 1. And now we're just going to do that last step in order to get x all by itself, what do I need to do to both sides?
Add 1.
We're going to add 1 to both sides. Exactly. And then over here, 1 plus 1, I get 2. And over here, -1 plus 1, what do I get?
0.
0. So my two x-intercepts, my solutions, are x equals 1, or x equals 0, and x equals 2. And don't forget, we're not graphing today, but what are these two things? What are they exactly?
The zeros, X.
The zeros, yeah, the x-intercepts. So if I was going to graph this, those would be my two x-intercepts. All right, take a moment because I know we wrote a lot of stuff, so make sure catch up, make sure you have everything written down. And right now is a great time to ask me any questions, especially the students who yesterday didn't get to the end of class because they had to leave, or anyone who just needs a good review from yesterday's class. Right now is a good time. Make sure you understand how to do each step and where each of those numbers comes from.
Is 0 always going to be in X?
Is 0 always going to be in a, can you explain that again? Oh, like the answer we got?
Yes.
Nope, not always. I know that it was kind of a coincidence, right? Because we got it on this example as well as this example, but it's not always going to be that way. You can get pretty much any two numbers. It just
Okay.
depends. Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Jade. Thank you for that great update. Very, very helpful to our class. Very, very useful. Anyone else? Okay, cool. So let's do one more. Last one that we're going to do together. And then after this, we're going to do some more challenging ones. So first off, let me paste. So now I just want you guys to tell me what to do. I have no idea how to do this. Go. What do I do first?
Change G, X to 0.
Okay. All right. What can I do now? Someone else.
5 to both sides.
Okay. Subtract 5 on both sides. Okay, so what happens when I do that?
The 5 on the right side cancels out, and then the 0 on the left side becomes -5.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, can I skip step 3? I don't see a number there. Can I skip it?
It's an invisible one there, right?
Oh, okay. Oh, I see, because you have a negative sign, right? So negative is really a -1. So what am I supposed to do with that?
Divide everything by -1.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so is that going to cancel?
That's going to cancel out the 1 on the
Yes.
right.
And then what happens here?
It turns into a +5.
Okay. Why does it turn positive?
When you're multiplying two negatives or dividing two negatives, it turns positive.
Okay, cool. Cool. All right. All right, now I'm on step 4. I have to take the square root of both sides. Okay, so I'm doing this. And why am I doing that?
To get rid of the exponent.
To get rid of this exponent right here? Oh, so it's gonna
Yes.
go away, right? I can just like, it's gone. Okay. Okay. Well, okay, what's the square root of 5 then? Square root of 5. Should I try that on my calculator? What happens? I gotta turn it. Let me find the square root button. Square root of 5. Huh. That's a really big number. Here's what I got. Is that what you guys are getting too? 2.236067977549979. What kind of number is that? We've talked about this. I remember learning it. Yes, Lauren, good. That's an irrational number. So let's talk about that. Let's see what this actually means. The square root of 5 is an irrational number. Who can remind me what makes a number irrational? What kind of numbers are irrational numbers?
It can't be a fraction.
It can't be a fraction. Good. So cannot be written as a fraction. And when I put an irrational number into my calculator, what do they always look like? Like this is a good example, but there's a lot of other examples. Good. No repeating. So non-repeating. And there's one more characteristic. This is like what Lauren said, a lot of numbers pop up. That's because this type of decimal is what type of decimal? It's non-repeating and it's do the numbers end? No. So what do we call that? Infinite. Good. Non-repeating and infinite decimal. So we talked about this in topic 7, so it's been a little while, but this is something that we talked about a lot. There's a lot of numbers that are irrational numbers, which just means that you can't write them as a fraction. They're going to be really long decimals, non-repeating, they're infinite, so they never actually end. And because of that, we don't really write these as decimals. We're going to keep it as a square root. Let me give you another example. So what's another, somebody else give me another square root that would actually be irrational. The square root of what? Good, Samantha gave me 7, good. Juan is giving me 2. Anyone else? There's a lot of them, so just shout out any numbers that you know. What was that?
3.
3. Let's do one more. 13, good. Awesome. So all of these are irrational numbers because you can't take the square root of it and get a nice answer. So for example, in this example, you can take the square root of 1 and we get +1 and -1. In the bell ringer, you can take the square root of 4, you get +2 and -2. And that's because the number 4 and the number 1 are perfect squares. We call them perfect squares because when you take the square root, you get a nice answer. But in this case, this is a non-perfect square. So all of these are non-perfect squares. And if you're solving an equation like this one and you end up with a non-perfect square, we're actually just going to leave it. We're not going to turn it into a decimal. we're not going to make it into like, because if you turn it into a decimal, you have to round up or down. So we're actually just going to leave it as a square root. So what's going to happen here is that, remember, we get the positive answer and the negative answer. So we end up with the positive and negative. So this symbol right here, it's a plus sign and a minus sign. So it's just the positive and negative square root of 5 equals x plus 2. Again, the reason I'm doing that is because you can't take the square root of 5. You end up with an irrational number. So we just leave it as the square root of 5. Does anyone have any questions on this part right here? We're going to do a few examples. So if you're a little bit iffy about it, hopefully another example will help it make sense. Yes, so we just leave it as the square root of 5. But you have to write positive and negative. And there's one more step, right? Because we still don't have x by itself. So we still have the last step. What is the last step going to be?
Subtract 2.
We're going to subtract 2, exactly. So let me show you what that's going to look like. Because when you subtract 2 on both sides, what happens is you get -2 plus or minus the square root of 5. So that -2 just goes up here in the front. We have plus or minus because, again, it's the positive and the negative answer. And this is my final answer. So x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of 5. And let me also break it down a little bit further so we totally understand. I'm just going to move this over a little bit. Oh man, hold on. Okay. So what this means, what this means is that this is kind of like a shorter way of writing that we have x equals -2 plus the square root of 5, and we have -2 minus the square root of 5. So you can write it this way as well. That's fine. You can do it this way. I think on Khan Academy they might do it this way. But you can also write it kind of like a condensed version, because this is just telling us that you could add or you could subtract. You can do one or the other. Now, on Khan Academy, I believe, if some of you have already, Karina did it like 10 minutes after class, crazy. But some of you might have started it, and you might see that they ask you for the greater x and the lesser x. And that just means which one is a greater number and which one is a smaller number. So let's talk about this real quick, because let me actually go back. When it's whole numbers, it's pretty easy. Which of these is the lesser x?
0.
0 is the lesser, good. And then +2 is the greater. It's just the greater number and the smaller number. But over here, it's a little bit less easy to understand. So let's think about this. The square root of 5, we already, if you plug it into your calculator, we know it's like 2.2-ish. It's about 2.2. So I'm starting from -2, -2 plus that number versus -2 minus that number. Which one's going to be greater? The one on the left or the one on the right?
The one on the left.
The one on the left, the one where you're adding. So basically, since we're adding, the one where you add will always be greater, and the one where you're taking away, where you're subtracting, that's going to be lesser. So even if you're not sure exactly what the answer is, you still can figure out which one's going to be a bigger number and which one's going to be a smaller number. So that's kind of like as challenging as it's going to get. I will add one more small challenge in a little bit, but how do we feel about this? How do we feel? Any questions? Let's do another one. And then after we do a few more, we'll see how we feel. Okay. Anybody still writing? Anybody need a moment? Okay. All right. So very similar. Let me see. Do I still have, can I paste? Nice. Okay. I'm going to keep these here today, but after today, this is something that everybody should feel pretty good doing without having to look at the steps. So look, they already set it equal to 0. Awesome. So now I'm moving k to the other side. What am I doing?
Adding 11.
Adding 11.
Good. Adding 11. Okay. 0 plus 11, I get 11. And then x plus 7 squared equals 11. Divide by the a value. Do I have an a value in this case, technically?
Yes and no.
Yes and no, because what is my a value in this case?
1.
It's a 1. If I divide by 1, is it going to change anything?
No.
So do I need to do it?
No.
No, we can skip step number 3 because it's just 1, so it doesn't really matter. But step 4, we still got to do. We're going to take the square root of both sides. And this is a very similar situation because the number 11, is that a perfect square?
No.
No, it's not. So we end up with x plus 7 equals the positive and negative square root of 11. You have to remember the plus minus because anytime you take the square root of something, you always are going to get 2 answers. You always have the positive answer and the negative answer. So it's important to make sure you remember to do both. And then I go to my last step. I'm going to solve for x. What should I be doing to both sides?
Subtracting 7.
Subtracting 7. And this is very similar to the other problem. So can anyone tell me how I'm going to write my final answer?
It's going to be -7 plus negative square 11.
So plus or minus, that's how we say this. We say plus or minus. Plus or minus the square root of 11. And that's it. And then for the purposes of Khan Academy specifically, because Khan Academy kind of breaks it down more than the test or something like that, or a quiz. So for that reason, I just want to make sure we know how to do it that way as well. So for Khan Academy, what would be my greater? What would be my greater x?
-7 plus square 11.
Plus the square root of 11. And then my lesser would be the opposite, -7 minus the square root of 11. Okay, so basically you just split it up into the 2 possibilities. Okay, so as of right now, at this point, you guys learned everything you need to know in order to do the homework successfully. So that's pretty cool. So basically from here until the end of class, we're just kind of practicing it more and more. and getting used to it. And then it's your chance to ask any questions. And then at the very end of class, if we have time, I'll let you guys do the homework if you haven't done it yet. Or if you finished it, like some of my overachievers in this class, I have some extra credit work that you guys can do. So at this point, questions. Keep asking those questions because it's super helpful, not just for you, but for other people who are in this class who might have the same question as you. So does anyone, maybe you don't know where something came from or you're not really sure? The rules are exactly the same for any problem. Yep. It's just that each problem is going to have different numbers, right? So depending on the numbers, you might get to skip some of these steps, or you might end up with, you know, one of these answers instead of a whole number. But the rules are always the same. You go in that order. Okay. All right, let's do another one. Oops. So here's an example of one where you can actually skip a lot of steps because, okay, set the function equal to 0. They must have done that already. Move k to the other side. They did that already. So I can skip, do I need to divide by a in this case?
No, it's 1.
No. Yeah, it's 1, so I don't need to do that. So I can skip all the way down to step number 4.
You never know. Maybe they already did that.
Right, maybe there was an a value and they already did it for you. Exactly. So that's actually exactly, that was, I'm glad you asked that question, because here's a perfect example where, yeah, you always follow these rules, but a lot of times they already did them for you. So you can skip all the way to step 4. Okay, step 4, we take the square root. We already know that. And we have x minus 12 equals the positive and negative square root of 54. Now this question is a little bit different because the number 54, you can't take the square root, right? Is this a perfect square? No, right? And you can always check if you're not sure, at least during class, you can always check. If you're not sure, go to your calculator, type in the number 54, take the square root, and if you get something like this, then you know for sure this is not a perfect square. However, the number 54 has some factors. So let me move this over a little bit. Sometimes when you have a number that's kind of larger, like 54 is a pretty big number, it's going to have some factors. So I know that 54 is 1 times 54, 2 times 27, right? Keep going for me. What are other factors of 54?
Three times 18.
Good. 3 times 18. There's a few more. Keep trying it. You can try it on your calculator if you're not sure.
9 times 6.
9 times 6. Good. And I think that's it. Unless I'm pretty sure that's it. So what happens is you want to look at the factors. Are there any factors of 54 that are perfect squares? Can you take the square root of any of these numbers?
Nine.
Yeah, good. The 9. 9 is a perfect square. So sometimes you are going to have this scenario where you have a bigger number, which you can kind of split it up into these two factors. And let me show you what happens in that case. So what's going to happen is I'm going to keep the left side the same for now. I'm not going to do anything there. But I'm gonna sort of split this up. This is going to be 6 times 9. Right? 54 equals 6 times 9. That doesn't really affect anything. However, since 9 is a perfect square, we can actually take the square root of 9. What is the square root of 9?
3.
It's 3. So what happens is we can bring that 3 out. Three times the square root, what's left over is 6. So what we did is since you can take the square root of 9, since 9 is a perfect square, the square root of 9 equals 3, we can bring that 3 out of the radical. We can live outside. And this is going to be a more, when we're talking about when the question says make sure you simplify, this is more simplified than what we started with. I know that it doesn't look more simplified, but with math, in math, if you're able to take anything out, you have to take it out. So since I can take out that 3, you have to do it. In order to be the most simplified answer, you have to do it. So this is where I said I'm going to make it a little bit more challenging, just a little bit more. But this, I promise, after this is as challenging as it gets. So how are we on this step? Any questions so far? A little iffy, that's okay. We'll do a few more examples. I put up a bunch of examples of this so that we can make sure we practice it. Now I still have one more step though. What's my last step gonna be?
Add 12.
We're gonna add 12 to both sides. Oh, I used bad colors before. Okay. We add 12 to both sides. I end up with 12 plus or minus 3 square root of 6. Okay, any questions so far? And I'm going to go ahead and box that. So this step right here where we converted it from the square root of 54 to 3 times the square root of 6, we'll do that a few more times. So we'll practice it. Someone said, that's very long. Yeah, this doesn't look like a nice, pretty answer, does it? But it is actually the most simple as you're technically in math, this is the most simplified response. This is the most simplified answer. So if you ended up with 12 plus or minus the square root of 54, you still have to do this step where you simplify it even more. Technically, yeah. I say technically because I know that in math, a lot of times you like that, the other answer wouldn't be wrong. If you ended up with x equals 12 plus or minus the square root of 54, it's not that this is wrong, it's just that it's not simplified. So if you got this, technically you're not wrong, but if you don't put the simplified answer, they're going to mark you wrong. So see what I mean by that? Or you might lose a couple points. So you always have to check to see if you can simplify. Let's do another one. Everybody good on this page? Anyone still writing? Okay. All right, so I have a couple of examples. How about I'm gonna have you guys try this one on your own, because this one does not do all this. This one's a little bit, number one is a little bit easier. And then we'll do number 2 together. But some of you guys might want to try number 2 by yourselves, go for it. If you feel like you can, if you feel good about it, or at least you want to give it a try, go for it. So I'm going to give you guys 4 minutes right now to do as much as you personally want to be able to do. Try the first one. If you're good and you're finished with the first one, then go ahead and move on to the second one. 4 minutes. All right, guys, about 1 minute remaining. You can send me your answers in the chat and I'll let you know if you got it. All right, that's time. All right. So for number one, let's go ahead. I'm not going to write down the steps. I want you guys to tell me what I need to do first.
Add 2 to both sides.
We're going to add 2 to both sides. All right. Set that up. Okay. Add 2 to both sides. I have x plus 8 squared equals 2. Okay. Now what do I do?
Square root.
Square root. What's the square root of 2? What happens there?
There is no square root of 2.
There is no whole number square root of 2. So we just leave it as the square root of 2, but I have to make sure that I write positive and negative square root of 2. And now finally, what do I do as my last step?
Subtract 8.
Subtract 8. Good. Now, I had a question in the chat. I want to explain something because I've been writing it one way, and I just want to show you the reason. So I've been writing it like this. I've been writing -8 plus or minus the square root of 2. And somebody in the chat was asking me, why can't you do it this way? Why can't you do positive and negative square root of 2 minus 8? The answer to that is, okay, this is fine. This is correct. It's still correct. However, the reason we write it the other way is because if you write it this way and you're sloppy with your handwriting, or in general, you don't pay close attention, it might look a little bit like the 8 is also underneath the radical. Now, I'm very careful. I make sure that I make my radical super short. However, it is possible to make it look this way by accident. So if you put the 8 on the other side, if you put this -8 over here instead, then you're not going to make that mistake. So putting it on this side kind of leads to the possibility of making a mistake or reading it wrong. But when you put it in the front, then you don't have to worry about making that mistake. So let me rewrite it.
There can't be a negative square root, right?
No, there cannot be.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So that's our final answer. And of course, we would be able to then break this up into the greater, which would be -8 plus the square root of 2, and then the lesser, which would be -8 minus the square root of 2. So any questions on number 1?
On the test, do we have to simplify it?
Yes. Always, anytime on a test, if you have to write your answer in, usually it's multiple choice, so you can just look at the answer choices and then kind of figure it out. But if you have to fill it in on any type of question, you always want to make sure that it's as simplified as humanly possible.
We have to put both greater and lesser.
Oh, is that what you mean? In that case, then on a test, they would be like, okay, greater, fill it in, lesser, fill it in, kind of like Khan Academy. If they don't give you 2 options, then you can just type in the one where it's merged together.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, number 2. Did anyone try number 2?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's do it. It's very similar, actually. I thought that this one was going to be a little more challenging, but then I realized it's actually not. It's pretty similar. So let's just go ahead and do it together. First things first, I'm going to do what?
Add 10.
Add 10. Okay, x plus 15 squared equals 10. Now what?
Square root everything.
Square root everything. Okay, my square root cancels out. I have x plus 15 equals the positive and negative square root of 10. Now let's check it out because 10 is a slightly bigger number. What are the multiples of 10 or the factors of 10?
1 and 10, 2 and 5.
1 times 10, 2 times 5. Are any of these a perfect square?
No.
No.
Nope. So we can leave it. So that's good. We can leave it. This is very similar to number 1. What should I do as my last step?
Subtract 15 on both sides.
Exactly. So we get x equals -15 plus or minus the square root of 10. Two very similar questions, very similar to the types of questions on Khan Academy as well. So if you're going to do those tonight, would be a good night since we've already learned everything you need to know for Khan Academy. Any questions? Cool. All right, we're getting right through it. Let's take a look at this one. This one's a little bit longer, right? We have a little bit more information, and I don't know if we're going to be able to skip any steps. So let's go through it. So first I set it equal to 0. 0 equals 3 times x plus 1 squared plus 12. Cool. I'm going to move k to the other side. So which one's my k?
12.
The 12. And what operation do I need to use? Subtraction. All right. 0 minus 12, I get negative 12 equals 3 times x plus 1 squared. Now I'm dividing by a. Which one's a?
3.
The 3. Good. It's been a while, but here we are. We have to divide by a. And what's negative 12 divided by 3?
Negative 4.
Good, negative 4. Cool. Step 4, take the square root of both sides. What's the square root of negative 4?
Negative 2.
Okay, what's negative 2 times negative 2?
Positive.
Oh, positive 4. So what's the square root of negative 4?
2.
2 times 2 is,
Positive 4. It's gonna be negative 2.
but negative 2 times negative 2 is,
Positive 4.
so is there a way to get negative 4?
Negative 2 times 2.
Are those the same number though?
No.
Okay, everyone go to your calculator, whatever you have, type it in. Square root of negative 4, what happens? What does it say?
Oh, there can't be a square root for negative numbers.
You can't take the square root of a negative number. Let me write that down. You can't take the square root of a negative number. You simply can't. So when you end up with something like this, where it's you're supposed to take the square root of a negative number, but we know that that's not possible, we get no solution. You can't do it. It's not allowed. It's not mathematically possible. So you end up with no solution. But let's actually think about what that means, because if you get an answer, these answers, those are my x-intercepts. So if there's no solution, what does that mean about the graph?
The graph is not viable.
What do you guys think? Not viable?
It doesn't touch the x.
It doesn't touch the x-axis. Well, how in the heck does that work? Let's see. Let's do a little sketch. So actually, let me move that down a little bit. We started off with an equation that's in vertex form. What is the vertex of this function based on the equation?
Negative 1, comma 12.
Negative 1, comma 12. And what does the 3 tell me about the graph?
It's stretched and it's upward.
stretched, and it's upward. So let's see what that's going to look like. I'm going to have to move this over a little bit, actually. Okay. So -3 or -1 comma 12. I'm going to do a lot of little lines here. There's the 12. -1 comma 12, that's right here. And then the graph is stretched and upward. So the graph is going to look like this. Is this graph ever going to come down and touch the x-axis?
No.
It's not. So the graph is viable. It exists. We can graph it. Look, it's beautiful, actually. And the only thing is, since there's no solution, there's no x-intercepts. That's all. And that's totally okay. It happens all the time. It's just that mathematically, that's what this looks like. Mathematically, you get no solution, and that's just because this is just, it's not going to touch the x-axis. How do we feel about that? Any questions? So as long story short, sometimes you get a number that even though it's not going to be a pretty number, you can still take the square root. We just get an irrational answer, and that's still fine. But if it's a negative number, that's where you get no solution. Okay, any questions? We have a couple more slides and then it's time for practice. That's awesome, Raymond. I'm happy to hear that. Okay, let's do one more of these. So I want you guys to try this one on your own and tell me, is this going to have solutions or no solutions? Start it off on your own, see what happens. I'll give you guys 2 minutes. Take about 30 more seconds. Let me know in the chat, will it have a solution or will it have no solution? Good, guys. 10 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. What do we get? Solution or no solution?
No solution.
No solution. Let me take you through it real quick. Set it equal to 0. Subtract 3 from both sides. I get -3 equals 2 times x plus 5 squared. I have to divide by 2. So I have, let me make this a little better. Okay, so I have -3/2 equals x plus 5 squared. And what happens is you try to take the square root of that number, but that number is a negative number, and we know we can't do that. So this one's no solution. Doesn't matter that it's a fraction. Believe it or not, fractions are fine, but since it's a negative fraction, that's why you end up with no solution. All right, questions.
I turned it into a decimal.
Yeah, that's fine as well. You can turn it into a decimal or leave it as a fraction. Either way, decimals are fine as long as they're positive. Oops, if they're negative, that's the problem. All right, so it's 10:23. So at this time, I want everybody to get started on their Khan Academy assignment. If you finish Khan Academy, so we're gonna work on Khan Academy. If you finish your assignment, then you can work on these problems for extra credit. And I'll accept these as extra credit if you want to do them by Friday at midnight. All you have to do is do them on a separate sheet of paper, take a picture, and send the picture to me. So first things first, we're working on Khan Academy. If you finish Khan Academy, then you can move on to the extra credit problems. And what I suggest is that everybody take a picture of the extra credit now, so that if you finish Khan Academy later today, or if you finish it tomorrow and you want to do the extra credit assignment, you can do it later. But take a screenshot of it now so that you have it with you. So we'll be doing that for the remainder of time. And I'll be here in case you guys have any questions. If anyone has any questions, I can go through a problem together. That way you guys can get some extra practice. Whatever you guys need, I'm here. But stay on. There's about 20 minutes remaining.